Hey everybody, it's Don. I'm coming to you today from Morris Reserve near Bellbrook, Ohio, to witness the emergence of periodical cicadas. So let's go. I got word that cicadas were emerging at this park, which is in Greene County, and I was surprised to hear that this brood 14, was emerging this far north in Ohio. So I headed out today on Memorial Day 2025 to see what's happening. So let's take a look at what I'm seeing so far. I've barely gotten in 50 yards from the parking area and cicadas are everywhere. Okay, so let's take a look at what's happening right now with brood 14 cicadas at Morris Reserve near Bellbrook. First of all, I have one crawling on me right now. All right, they're out here flying around clumsily. They've landed on me 10 times so far, crawling all over my hat, my back, my arms. When you feel this, by the way, you know, their claws, they have little sharp claws, and so it feels like you're being pinched a little bit. They do not bite, they don't sting or anything like that, but they kind of dig into your skin as they're crawling around. So I think when some people feel that, they think they're being attacked. But really, they're just big clumsy flyers and they're just crawling around. At this point, these cicadas, the ones I'm seeing, have relatively recently emerged. And so a lot of what I'm seeing are cicadas that have emerged just within a day or two, and they're just clinging to the nearest plant that they could climb on until they mature and harden up and develop the ability to fly. So if you look in front of me here, here's a cicada. It's pretty docile at this point, and they're just everywhere like this in this particular location. Okay, here's one, and here is where it came from. Here's its last nymphal skin, and it crawled out of the ground like that, and then emerged from that, crawled up these plant stems, and then expanded its wings and developed its mature appearance, which, if you ever want to know whether you have a periodical cicada versus an annual cicada, there's a couple of key features. Okay, periodical cicadas are very black, for one. They have red eyes, clear wings, and there are several species that can be in a single emergence. So in this emergence, I'm expecting 3 species. These are 17-year periodical cicadas. They are Magicicada septendecim, Magicicada septendecula, and Magicicada cassini. Now, 2 of those are similar in size. The 2 larger are similar in size, and you tell them apart by flipping them over. And the abdomen on septendecula is more orange than black, where the abdomen on a septendecim, excuse me, I have that backwards. Septendecim is more orange than black, septendecula is more black than orange. Magicicada cassini, on the other hand, is smaller, markedly smaller than the other 2. So I have seen at least a couple of those species here so far. The one I have in my hand right now, well, I didn't get a chance to look at it. Let me see if I can find, like here, for example, is a small cicada. It's almost certainly Magicicada cassini. I'll get a few and flip them over in a second to show you some differences between the species. In my hand now, I'm holding a Magicicada septendecim, and I know that because it has orange bars on its abdomen. Okay, I tried to flip there, if you might be able to see this. I tried to flip it over, but it keeps wiggling out of my grasp. So to really identify cicada, you've got to grab it and flip it over. You can also sex them that way, tell whether they're a male or a female, because a female will have a long saw-like ovipositor to deposit eggs in tree branches, and the males won't have that. And this one is also called the pharaoh cicada because when they sing, their song tends to sound like Pharaoh when they do it. At this point in their life cycle, at this location in particular, there's a real mix of activities going on as well. So as I showed you near the ground, we have lots that are still emerging, hardening up, maturing for a few days until they're ready to fly. I am seeing lots flying as well. As I look into this wood line here, this fence line, I see lots of cicadas flying around. I also hear them starting to sing. And cicadas sing most strongly in the afternoon like this. It's about 3 o'clock on a fairly warm day. It's nice and sunny, probably 72, 73 degrees. This is the kind of time and day that they would start to sing. And once these things really all mature and start to sing in unison, they can get extremely loud. All right, they can reach 100 decibels, like higher than like a lawnmower. And so it's incredibly loud, their shrill songs, and then they sing in unison. Of course, it's the males that are doing all the singing, right? The males have to impress the females with their amazing singing, like I try to do when I go to karaoke. But, and they're trying to attract a female to accept them as a mate. And so females don't make much noise at all. They, upon acceptance of a mate, it's thought that they might make a clicking sound, and then they flick their wings a little bit to indicate to a male that they are receptive to mating. And then during the time they are above ground, that's mostly what these things are doing. They're trying to find mates and they're mating. They mate continuously while they're above ground, which only lasts about 6 weeks. So most of these will be gone. Again, it's May 26th today. Most of these will be gone by around July 4th or shortly thereafter. And in between now and then, they'll be maturing, mating, and then eventually the females will start to lay eggs. So they're not doing that yet. They aren't near ready to do that, but let me show you a tree here that more or less indicates what they look like when they're laying eggs. In particular, this one, which is lined up with a twig here. And that's about the right location or so where they will lay their eggs. And so they use this saw-like ovipositor, this egg insertion device, to cut slits into the twig on the underside typically, where they'll lay several eggs, dozens of eggs, for example, and then fly away. Okay, and they will do that several times before they eventually die. And so in this process, the males tend to emerge first from the ground, and they also die first after they've done their job. The females emerge later, and they stick around a little longer to oviposit, and then they then will die as well. And so, you know, these are just actually up here maturing and warming up at the moment. They're all pretty docile at this point. You can pick them up readily. Okay, these are, I think, cassini. They're pretty small. Here's a good look at the abdomen of a cicada, and that looks like a septendecula. It has a completely black abdomen, and it's not the tiniest of the species, I don't think. Oh, it may be. This could be a cassini. It is. This is the smaller of the 3 species, okay? Magicicada cassini, which again, as you saw there, was all black in the abdomen as well, but just markedly smaller than the other 2 species. All right, now, so everybody always asks, what good are these things? First of all, they don't have to be good in our regard. They're just out here to make a living, as you know, enforced through natural selection. But they do things that are beneficial to the environment and even to us. So that act of emergence out of the ground aerates the turf, aerates the soil. So that's one thing they do right away, just by the sheer act of coming out of the ground. Once they're above ground, they serve as an ample food source for all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, mammals, predatory insects, all kinds of things. Anything will eat them. They're not toxic. They're an abundant temporary food source. And there have been a number of studies that have shown that the emergence of periodical cicadas usually corresponds with a upsurge in, say, egg laying by birds or insect populations and things like that. So they serve as an abundant food source. That's true for when they die as well. Okay, they become food for microbes in the soil, but they also become fertilizer for plants. So this is where we did a little study in my laboratory and showed that the bodies of cicadas, if you substituted them for lawn fertilizer, you could get grass to grow just about as well as if you fertilized the grass. All right, so they have a demonstrated now fertilization effect on plant growth. This emergence is interesting, partly because we had a large emergence of brood 10 in this area just 4 years ago. And I was not expecting this brood to emerge this far north in Ohio, this abundantly, that is. It was well known they were going to emerge in the Cincinnati area and into Kentucky and in Tennessee, but here we're just outside of Dayton, southeast of Dayton, and they're quite a large number at this particular preserve. So that was quite interesting to me. And so, but they're always fun to emerge, regardless of when and where it is. One interesting thing about cicadas is these are periodical cicadas. They're on a 17-year life cycle. And that means that the eggs that are laid this year will hatch into nymphs that fall to the ground, enter the ground, and they'll be in that ground for 17 years until they emerge again. But some get thrown off. Some start to get off cycle a little bit. And so there can be what we call stragglers that either emerge early or emerge later than they're supposed to, given the brood that they're a member of. And so I saw stragglers of this brood emerging last year in southern Ohio. I found a few cicadas emerging that we would call stragglers because they were like a year ahead of time. They missed out on the big party because they came out of the ground at the wrong time. And so if enough of those stragglers emerge off cycle at the same time, they can start to develop their own brood with enough time, if there are enough of them that survive to mate. And so, but if it's only a few, and they're few and far between, they just don't live long enough, they don't survive. Not enough of them mate to really get a new brood started. But there is some idea that can happen, or that has happened. All right, so let's keep walking up the trail here at Morris Reserve and see what else we can see regarding these cicadas. Well, it's nice to see that there are lots of people out here enjoying this park today, and most of them are appreciative of cicadas and of course birds. A number of people are out here looking at birds, but I'm walking uphill now in an upland area to get to an area where we can really hear these cicadas. So I'm going to pause here for a few minutes and just listen. So that sound you're hearing, that is one or more of the 3 species of cicada that I described to you. And that might make you wonder, how the heck do they find the proper mate if there's 3 species out here at the same time and they're all singing at once? Well, they all have slightly different songs. And so a cicada can tell them apart. A human can too, if you get good at it. The most obvious thing is the pharaoh cicada, like I said, septendecim. And they have this sound where the surges in the song sound like they're saying pharaoh, pharaoh. And so I'm kind of hearing that now, blended with some other sounds as well. The different species also have slightly different activity patterns, as I understand it. I can't remember exactly the slight differences, but they sing, you know, one may sing earlier in the day than another and that kind of thing. But somehow they manage to mostly mate with members of their same species and avoid the others. And that's how they can retain their species identity, despite the fact that there are 3 species out here at once. Okay? One other thing to mention while I'm talking about cicadas and their life cycle and all that is that we also have annual cicadas here. And annual cicadas are called that because there are some of them coming out every year. It doesn't mean that their life cycle is annual. They don't only live for 1 year. They live a shorter amount of time, 3 to 5 years, I think. But some of them are emerging every year. So we call them annual cicadas. They also have the name dog day cicada because they tend to come out in the dog days of July and August in the temperate eastern US. So those are very different looking. If you see them, they have more of almost a camouflage-like appearance. They're greenish, blackish, and pretty big. They're quite much bigger than periodical cicadas. And so, oh, there's a creaking tree over there. Here's an old foundation of some old homestead in this preserve. This is a relatively new preserve. I don't know how long ago it was in private hands, but it has an upland. Pretty nice woodlot, some big trees. One that's screaming at me over here. And then they've developed some of the previously farmed areas in the bottom of the preserve into prairie. So you can get prairie. And we're also near the border of the Mad River. Excuse me, not Mad River, the Little Miami River. And I think is a tributary here to the Little Miami that you can board, that the park borders as well. So this is just a little view of the upland area. I know you can find things like morels. It's a good birding area. This is not far from the southeastern suburbs of Dayton, so it's probably a fairly heavily visited park. And so I think this is just my second time here, but I'm really excited that this brood is here because we aren't due to see another brood of cicadas for quite some time in Ohio. I think the next brood that might come out is still about 9 years away. So in this particular area. So let me proceed up the trail and see what else there is to see and talk about. All right. Here's another good spot for some calls. So let's pause and listen. Since we're still at the early point of this emergence, in about 1 week to 2 weeks, this sound will be deafening. This is really picking up here in this location, and that's because it's a sunny spot out here. There's a little opening. This is exactly where the cicadas like to congregate, and they're in these trees, and where it's sunny, warm, perfect location to set up shop, you know, do your best song and try to attract a mate. Females also don't fly very much. They sort of flit around making short flights, where males will fly longer distances from tree to tree, just to, you know, look for greener pastures. If elm number 1 over here doesn't work, you go to maple number 2 over there, so forth. But yes, I'm hearing a good chorus here, and in the background I'm hearing a great shrill chorus as well. Oh yeah, we're gonna head in that direction and see if we can get in the middle of that. Yeah, this is fun. I'm having a great time. So try to listen here. There's a steady shrill in this area, but in the background you can hear this pharaoh idea, where it's a rise and a fall in the call, like pharaoh. It almost sounds like it might be a bird doing it, or something yelping. I love it. Well, in this backdrop, I'll tell you another fun fact about cicadas, and that is that you can eat them. And I've done it. We've done it. The time to do it is right when they emerge from the ground, okay, which they will often do en masse at night. So you have to get out there in the early evening when their last nymphal stage, when they leave the ground. And they start to climb up their closest vegetation, trees, plants, walls of your house, what have you. And then the adult emerges from the last nymphal skin. And it's right then when they emerge, before they've started to harden up and mature and turn into this black adult with red eyes, that you want to get them, okay? Because they're soft. They haven't expanded their wings. And you can do things like saute them or deep fry them, bread them. And interestingly, they taste like asparagus. Presumably that's because of the plant diet they've been eating. They feed on tree roots the whole time they're underground. And so that imparts the flavor of asparagus. It's true. Try it. Here's a good spot to witness the emergence holes. So these holes you see, I'm right on a walking trail, heavily traveled, but these were all emergence holes that the last developmental stage underground makes on their way out. And as I referred earlier to how this can aerate your soil, well, this gives you an idea. It can improve air exchange and water infiltration into hard-packed soils, just like this trail bottom. I'm approaching a little spot here that has a kind of a swinging bridge. I guess it's not totally swinging, but let's cross that and see what we see out here. I was told there are a lot of cicadas here, but I'm seeing that there are a lot of cicadas everywhere today. Okay, it's not exactly swinging, but it's kind of shaky. That's fun. Oh yeah. I guess it definitely gets a swing to it. Hope I make it. All right, right on, I made it. Okay, let's keep circling around and see what else we can see about cicadas. Earlier I mentioned this is brood 14. So first of all, what's a brood and what about these numbers? Why is this brood 14? Well, when people started to study cicadas, recognize the phenomenon and started to kind of look at them more scientifically, Marlatt, for example, a researcher who really got into cicadas, like a lot of people are, started to identify that, that large groups of cicadas would emerge all on the same schedule repeatedly. And when he started to collect this data and record these observations, he would give each brood that emerged in a given year a number, starting with number 1 and then on down the line. So this was the 14th brood to have emerged after he started naming them. 4 years ago, we had members of brood 10 emerge in this area as well, And we have brood 8 in parts of Ohio as well. Okay, that emerged in 2016, I think. I believe it was brood 8. And so, yes, a brood is a large population of cicadas that all emerge on the same schedule repeatedly. And again, the numbering just simply comes from how they were identified in their order of emergence once they started to be identified. So this is brood 14. Way to go. You could get little jerseys with a 14 painted on them. Another question that arises with cicadas is, are they damaging to trees at all? And let's kind of talk about that for a little bit. First of all, I mentioned that they do have to inject their eggs into twigs or branches. The females do it with a saw-like ovipositor. She literally cuts slits in the twig, causing a wound that she inserts the eggs in. And those eggs will hatch and the nymphs will fall out. They rain out of the trees back to the ground, where they crawl back into the ground to start things all over again. But that act of oviposition is damaging to twigs and branches and can be. So if we look at, here's a cicada that's more or less in an oviposition position, but she's not ovipositing, she's just hanging out. But they typically oviposit on the bottom of branches. And in the latter, say, 6 to 12 inches of branches is where they tend to lay their eggs. Diameter twigs about like what you're seeing here. Okay? Now, that can cause this, these small twigs to die. The last 6, 8 to 10 inches of a branch to die, and it'll eventually break off and fall to the ground. And you can see a tree that's had heavy oviposition on it because there'll be a lot of little branch ends, twigs that are flagged like that, where the leaves have turned brown, they hang down for a while. Some species, they hang for a long time and it's very noticeable, like oak trees. Others, the branches tend to fall off a lot more quickly, so you don't notice it as much. But, so there's some temporary damage done there, but really it's nothing more than like a minimal pruning to a large tree. They can shrug that off like nothing. However, if you're talking about a small tree, maybe in an ornamental setting, a fruit tree in your backyard or an ornamental tree you recently planted, you might want to cover them with a net, like netting temporarily, say from between now till about July 4th, to prevent the females from landing on the tree and ovipositing. And if you do that, you'll basically prevent any damage happening to a small tree, because they can be more vulnerable or more sensitive to that kind of damage. But otherwise, there's no reason at all to be afraid of these, to try to kill them, to try to get rid of them. Just let them do their thing. This is one of these spectacles of nature that's, should just be enjoyed while they're here. In this area, we won't see periodical cicadas now for quite some time, for, let's see, 13 years. We'll see brood 10 again. So, because they were here 4 years ago. So that's a long stretch, so enjoy them while they're here. They'll be gone before you know it, and just have fun. As I make my way back out of the preserve, just want to point out about what cicadas eat. I mentioned it below ground, they're feeding on tree roots. Well, what they do is they have a stylet, proboscis, that they poke into the roots of trees underground, and they basically drink sap. They drink sap from the xylem stream, which is very poor in nutrients. Maybe one of the reasons they take so long to complete their life cycle. This is the longest lived insect, for that matter. And adults, it was thought, really don't feed once they come out of the ground and do what they're doing today. But it was recently confirmed that they do indeed poke their stylets into tree branches and take sap just to stay hydrated. They really don't do that much feeding, not gaining that much nutrition, and they're not doing any damage with their feeding, but they do that to stay hydrated. So that's been relatively recently confirmed. And in so doing, they also will pee. Sometimes you can see this when they fly or when they take off. A little squirt of pee will come out the back end, and that's through the fluids, as a result of the fluids that they were feeding on as they were, when they were in the tree. So put your hat on when you walk in the woods when there's a cicada emergence. Well, this turned out to be a nice surprise. I had heard some cicadas were emerging here, but it turns out there are a lot of cicadas emerging here. So with that, I'll sign off for this week. Till next time, this is Don. Bye-bye.